My name is Steve Erwin, and I'm part of Human of Southgate.
Tell us your background a little bit and whatever you want to share.
I basically am a farm kid, Dixon County. I went to University of Nebraska. That's where I met my wife. And started out, I basically have an agricultural degree. I have an animal science degree from the University of Nebraska.
Okay.
So I started out in the ag field, but banking for the most part was something that was out there. And I ended up starting my banking career a couple of years out of college in Omaha.
Okay.
So been in and out of Omaha like 3 different times. And I worked in banks in Omaha, and then I ran a bank out in western Nebraska, Shadron. And I came back to Omaha, then I ended up in Lincoln. And at least for 40 plus years, that's been the business I've been involved with. But I guess when I retired from banking, but I told them in the banking I basically was changing careers other than retiring, because I really don't like that word. I turned around and I basically had worked 40 years, and in the last 20 some years, I'd basically been the district manager, regional manager for Nebraska. So I handled pretty much and worked with all the people that we had here in Nebraska, Western Iowa.
Wow.
So very, very, rewarding job. Met a lot of wonderful people, and I do still miss all the people today. But anyway, decided that I needed to do something different. I'm getting older, and time is one of those things, you just can't buy. So
Right.
you need to do more things you can, if you can. So,
Right. What did you enjoy so much about it, about the banking?
oh, definitely the people. I mean, we dealt in businesses, small businesses, individuals. So it was always it was always enjoyable in regard to seeing people have some success. That was something that we worked with. We basically were, we took care of people's money. And banking's somewhat simple. You take care of money, and then you take risk on the other side in regard to the lending side. But all in all, the people were the best. And it was the people that we worked with customer-wise, but also people I got to work with in the bank.
What did you do outside of the banking then? Like what?
Well, with my ag background, I never got away from, so to speak, the farm.
Yeah.
And even today, we have farms out in western Nebraska, my wife and I. Shouldn't say this, but some people, for the most part, buy a retirement home. I ended up buying a farm. And in any event, we run cattle out there.
Nice.
And so we have a livestock operation, and we turn around, and my 2 daughters made me decide that we needed to go ahead and sell some of the beef online. So we also have an online beef company.
Oh, that's nice.
And so we're active in that. So that's what we do today.
That's great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, good. All right, I'm going to ask you some questions. How did you become a Christian? I know it's a big ask, but how did that come about for you?
That question to a certain extent, because I was always involved. I mean, I had a family that, I think about the church that we grew up in, which is a little town of Concord, Nebraska, a little Lutheran church. I just had really, really good support. I had a really good support system around me. My parents, grandparents, people that were around me. So, it probably wasn't one of those things that, you can read about in regard to, did you have a revelation on a certain day? That really never really happened to me. I just was a believer.
Right.
And I was around a lot of believers. And then I had the good fortune, too, that when I got down to school, I was involved in things like FCA, Campus Crusade, a lot of things for the most part that, that particular support group was always very, very good. I shouldn't say this, but the day I went to St. Paul's, because, I can't, we have the COVID going on. And I thought to myself, I went to St. Paul today, and I haven't been there since I was in college.
Oh, wow.
And I'm trying to think of the minister that used to preach at that time. But on the other hand, he had an influence. He had an influence not only on me, but also some of the people that I went to school with at that time. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting in regard to at least my background. But my background, for the most part, I've always had a lot of support. And I just have always been a believer.
So faith was a big part of your family? I mean, not
Very
only,
much so.
yeah.
Yeah, very much so. Um, they were engaged one way or the other, uh, in music, the things that we have here at Southgate, uh, the women's group, the men's group, a couples group, whatever.
Mhm.
It's where I was confirmed, all those things, Sunday school, all those things for the most part, you were just engaged that way, which is very good. And then on, as you went on to college, it was important, I think, to continue to be engaged. And FCA was a big part at that time. And actually, my wife and I, when we came here to Lincoln, we started the FCA group here in Lincoln
Oh, wow.
at the Lincoln East School. They had it, but they weren't very active.
Yeah.
And so it was always nice to see those kids, from not only your kid's friend, but other kids for the most part, come to those. I don't know if it was monthly, weekly, or whatever, but come to those times. And it was real interesting in regard. At times, once in a while, we would get actually some university kids that would actually come in too. So it was good influences. At least that's what I thought.
Mhm.
And I know it was good.
Mhm. The question is, do you remember saying yes to Christ at a specific time, or was that a relationship that grew over time? And I'm hearing you kind of always said yes,
Oh yeah,
right?
over
Yeah.
time. I definitely it was over time. So
Mhm. How did you become acquainted with Southgate?
well, I was recruited by Harold Chafee.
Okay.
You know, Harold being the old football coach, athletic director. Fact is, believe it or not, I ran across Harold Chafee when he was assisting the Westland basketball coach, and they came out and played in a playoff game at Shadron.
Okay.
And it was a cold, snowy day, and he had his big coat on, but there was Harold Chafee. And I never really got introduced to him at the time, but then when I came back here, anyway, Harold, for the most part, had a lot to do with Southgate.
Yeah.
So it was a church that was similar to a church that we were um, a participant or we were a member of, which was Elkhorn Hills in Elkhorn, Nebraska.
Okay.
And Bill Ritter was the coach, or the coach. He was the minister at Elkhorn Hills.
Okay.
And so Southgate kind of reminded us of that particular church, and so that's how we became members.
That's cool. How has your Christian faith helped you in your life?
Oh goodness, I think it helps every day. I mean, just in your upbringing, but also in your decision making. Um, I mean, that's a big question.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the thing of it is, in regard to where you have faith, in my opinion, it gives you contentment. You know, we've got a challenge going on right now because I have lung cancer.
Oh.
And in fairness, it's kind of like when it came on, you're always going to say, well, why me? But on the other hand, my faith for the most part, it got me through, I mean, it really did. And my family. Um, I'm fortunate right now that I have a certain gene and I have a miracle drug and it's just doing wonders. So I have a miracle almost every day going on in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's today. But ongoing, I mean, you could just almost every day come up with something that pretty much said, well, how did that happen? Um, and not that I have a Pollyanna approach to everything, but on the other hand, when you have those challenges at times, it was something very, very good to rely on. And I think that's the thing in regard to Christians. I think Christians have something to rely on. It really kind of helps. And if you believe the scriptures, if you read in regard to all the challenges that they ran into, it's kind of like it isn't nothing compared to what we have today. In fact, I don't know how we got the silver spoon, but we do. I mean, you can turn around and, I have the good fortune of having some of Warren Buffett's stock, and quite honestly, in regard to Warren Buffett, he talks about, the silver spoon in regard to when he was born at this particular time. I mean, we just have so much to be grateful for and so many things that are happening all the time that, I don't think anybody for the most part can even explain it. you know. But that's the wonderful thing in regard to what we have.
Oh, I agree. Describe an experience when your faith helped you through a difficult time.
Well, I stated, most recently would be lung cancer,
Hmm.
you know. It's kind of like, I thought I was a pretty healthy guy, but I thought I had a bad cold, and we ended up finding that I had cancer and I have it all over. But on the other hand, I have a daughter who actually has sold pharmaceutical products, and her first comment was, "Dad, you got to have this gene." And I was fortunate to have this gene, and they've developed a medicine, a pill that it's just like taking a small Tylenol tablet every day, but it, for the most part, has pretty much taken care of the cancer. And you know, on the other hand, in regard to all my other cells, they've all normalized. So it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
So
When were you diagnosed?
about a year ago.
A year ago.
Yeah, January.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I know that the ability of people to, gene, right? Like
Yeah.
being able to identify that.
Right.
And then, there has to be faith in that, right, too?
Oh, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a miracle in regard to those people and all the research and all the dollars and what they're doing. Our people, we have some wonderful people in regard to research as to what they're finding out and how they're helping people. I have one of our good customers on the beef side. They found out their daughter had diabetes in a big way, and it's a juvenile diabetes. And I have a friend who has two sons that they had at a young age, and now actually both of them are professionals. One's a doctor, but in any event, it was real crushing for the family. But on the other hand, it was like there's so much more they're doing today for that particular disease than what he was doing 20 years ago. That kind of a cute story. He made the comment that he actually played professional football. His name is Rick Bonas,
Hmm.
which is a name that if you followed, was an All-American. And I think he actually was in Bob Hope's show when they introduced the
Right.
All-Americans. And anyway, he played 1 year for the Oakland Raiders when they won the Super Bowl.
Oh.
Kept his Super Bowl ring in our safe deposit box at the bank in Omaha. But he made the comment, he said, the thing of it was he found out that John also had a child that had juvenile diabetes.
Oh, really?
And he said when they went back to Washington, D.C. to lobby for funds for their research, anyway, John came down in his bus.
Oh, really?
Pretty much came in, and he says that was a real lobbying, advantage when you had John Madden go with you.
Exactly.
Everybody, for the most part, would listen.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But
Oh.
in any event, there's lots of good stories, but that's just one of those things in regard to people doing the right thing.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. Describe a time when you felt God nudging you out of your comfort zone.
well, I think right now, to a certain extent, to give an interview or to talk about your faith is difficult. I don't care what anybody says. Hopefully they see it, but on the other end, to talk about your faith, that can be difficult.
Mhm.
Um, being out of your comfort zone, it's always good to get out of your comfort zone. You'll kind of learn from it, but it happens. And I hate to talk about sports so much, but I can tell in regard to my grandkids right now, they're playing sports and they're out of their comfort zone at times. It isn't fun to get beat.
Right.
You for the most part learn from that. On the other hand, too, in regard to how hard you have to work for something, I think that goes along with it. But that's also in studies, in regard to your studies, which I look back and it was kind of like, man, I wished I would have studied harder, at that time. At the time, my priorities seemed to be a little bit different in regard to what I did with my time. But it's kind of like maybe should have been time spent maybe going to class or doing some of the other things. I for the most part, at times, was like, I probably could have been a better student.
Mhm. Um, have you ever had doubts about what you were taught about God in the Bible? And if you did, what did you do? Have you ever doubted things you were told?
Well, I think in regard to doubts, everybody has doubts. I think you get challenged, every day in regard to why does this happen to me? Or I don't understand this. And the Bible, for the most part, it has a lot of good stories, but it has a lot of tough stories too.
Mhm.
And so, you turn around and read that and it's kind of like, why? I had a brother think it's been now 4 years. A farmer, very strong Christian, which is wonderful. But, before Christmas, he basically was in a farm accident. Now, that's somewhat common when you start looking at it, but, it was my brother. And anyway, we lost him because of that farm accident.
Oh,
And it was kind of like, well, at that time, I know in regard to everybody's faith, it was, it was a concern. I mean, it's like, why would you take somebody like Tom? Um, but on the other hand, like my wife said, she said, the one thing about Tom, he lived his life as a Christian every day, and he did.
yeah,
So what an example,
right.
And time passes and things go on, and you get new opportunities, and his boys have done a wonderful job. And his wife's got along very well, so we're very, very thankful.
Yeah. Have you ever felt the Holy Spirit calling you to do something big?
I don't know what that means. I mean, when you say something big, um, I think I think the spirit that we have for the most part calls us to do things. You know, calling us to do something big. I don't know if I can really pick one time. I know in regard to me, my career, my family, it's all big.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Relative.
it's all big in regard to what we had. And the other thing is, I remember a guy saying one time to a group of real smart kids, he said, the thing of it is, you can go ahead and make plans, you can go ahead and have goals, but he said, I'll guarantee you, those will change, and they change all the time in regard to what you're going to do. So, the Spirit will lead you. It's just a matter of, do you really want to make those steps? Do you really want to make those decisions? And at times when you have to make those decisions, it's kind of like, well, I tell you what, then you want to make sure you're paying attention. Yeah, I mean, you're paying attention to what's going on. And that can be in the form of prayer, what you read in the Bible, what resources you have around you. Those are the kind of things I think that are really, real important to you.
Are you really actively listening, right?
Oh, very much so.
Because you might be listening, but are you really listening to what the Spirit is leading you to do, right?
Yeah, I'm convinced as I get older, I was not a good listener.
Hmm.
I'm convinced I need to be a better listener. And that's tough to do. Particularly when you get old. It's kind of like, oh, you got your own opinions, my wife tells me. But you really do need to be a good listener. And at all levels, whether it's those grandkids or, I have the good fortune that I'm able to coach, some of these young kids. So I'm still around them. And it's real interesting if you can listen to them in regard to, what they're telling you. And they're so honest in regard to what they're telling you.
Yeah.